But no, I appreciate you giving me some time to sit down with you
Yeah,
today,
no problem.
Freddie. If you want to introduce yourself, let the people know a little bit about you.
Yeah, so my name is Freddie Hart. I run FR Hart 2 Enterprises. It's a marketing and advertising firm. Our main focus is we focus on CEOs and executives who want to market their personal brand, which in turn markets their organization. And so that has a couple of silos to it. The first one is like the content creation, personal branding aspect. And then it's also the back end stuff. So like creating SOPs for the organization, email marketing, stuff like that.
Right.
And then now, because of the stuff that we do in those two realms, we've really started implementing AI. So building out AI platforms, AI chatbots, things of that nature for these organizations that we work with.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How big has AI been lately for you and what you're doing?
I was using it before ChatGPT came out, but it's definitely been a game changer for me and for the clients I serve from an efficiency perspective. So before, like, you would have copywriters for blog articles, you would have ghostwriters for quotes, and you'd have ghostwriters for books.
Right.
Well, because we were already doing the video side and the content creation side, we're able to utilize those videos, turn them into transcripts, and then use AI, ChatGPT, whatever platform you use, and generate all that stuff on our own. So like now it's, instead of, hey, I need you to come up with a great email marketing campaign for this bundle. Well, now it's, okay, you already did a video about this. In the chat prompt, I'm going to say, I need you to sound like a great marketer, Gary Vee, Russell Brunson, whatever it is, and write the email for this promotion. Yeah. So now off of this, we don't have to even spend much time here, but it allows us to go faster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. No, that's fire. And how long have you been doing it for?
Unofficially for 5 years, officially for 4 years. I started unofficially in 2019, and then the official like paperwork of my company is 2020.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so.
That's awesome.
Now, let me adjust this really quick. Give me a second.
Yeah, you're good. And I saw you just won a plaque, right? Best of Georgia 2024.
Yes.
Congrats.
So Best of Georgia, honorable mention for marketing firms in the area 2024. So yeah, that's been pretty cool. You know, I tell everybody like those awards are cool, and I always like to show my appreciation for them. Yeah. But like I always tell people when they get started, do not put your, I guess, feelings in those awards, because your heart will get broken for a couple of reasons. One, if you don't win it, you'll think that you're not good enough if that's where you're putting your hope in. Right. And then two, you'll start to see other people, and you'll almost have this like negative viewpoint of other people in your industry. So I know like for me personally, I was becoming a finalist for a lot of awards and a lot of things, and when I wouldn't win, I would go from, instead of saying, okay, I have to get better, to, okay, I can't believe that company won. They suck at this. They suck at that. And for me, positivity is one of the big things that I try to focus on. And so that doesn't put me in a positive mindset. So like this year, it was an honor to get that award. But this year I told myself, like, I'm really not going to try to pursue any of those awards, because I know that if I focus on growing the business and making it better, the awards will come. Exactly. Versus trying to hype yourself up to get the awards, and then you don't get the awards, and then you feel some type of way.
Yeah, I feel like sports is very similar to that, like mindset right there.
Right.
How did sports kind of mold you into becoming an entrepreneur?
So I know. So for the first thing, it's overcoming a failure rate, right? So like when I was in college and I was training for the NFL, they tell you like there's a 99% failure rate. But the thing about it is, when you're training for the NFL, you have to give it 1,000%, or else you're automatically going to cancel yourself out. Exactly. So it's like this phase of my life, I was training, giving 1,000% effort for a 1% success rate. So when I kind of shifted and focused on business, when somebody says that there's a 30% failure rate or a 20% failure rate, those were way better. I've trained and given everything for way worse odds. Yeah. So for me, that's not a problem. And then the second thing is, I've told a lot of people recently that with sports, there is a natural talent aspect to sports, right? Like you played baseball, like I played football. The guys that we played against who are in the major leagues, like you could look and tell that they were like a league above everybody, right? And so there's a time when you get into sports where regardless of how hard you work, your talent's going to have to factor in too. But the great thing about like business is more of a reps game. So it's like every 10 to 15 year entrepreneur that's doing well, that's consistent, they're going to keep separating themselves from the pack solely off of the reps that they take and solely off of the time and effort that they put in.
The consistency.
So I like that. I feel like that transferred from sports, because it's like in sports I was a competitive individual, but it's like now there's no, I think entrepreneurship is a skill. I don't necessarily think that everybody just has an automatic knack for it. And so I think that the people who really separate themselves are the people who hone in on those skills. And so like from a sports perspective, it just showed me like if I can continue to work and do the same things over and over and over again, I can separate myself versus relying on like a natural talent or something like that.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. And one thing I feel like people aren't talking about, like just coming out of baseball, like just did it for 20 years. You know, you played football for a very large section of your life, right?
Right.
Like that identity shift coming out of sports.
Yeah.
I feel like no one really talks about that. Like, how did you transition out of it and then like really just like take off with the business? You know what I mean?
So my story's a little bit different when it comes to football. I didn't start playing football till I was a junior in high school. So
Really?
because so I grew up playing all these other sports, and the rule was with my dad, okay, you have to make all A's if you want to play football. I don't know why that was in place specifically for football, but like that was just his rule.
Right.
And so I never made all A's, I never made all A's. Freshman year in high school, I got cut from Parkview's baseball team. And so I said, okay, my dad always said this in sports. He said, you can be really big, really fast, or really strong. I wasn't gifted with the gift of speed, and I really wasn't big at the time. So I was like, let me just fall in love with the weight room.
Yeah.
Well, I fell in love with it so much that the head coach at Parkview was my weight training teacher, and he kind of took notice. And I just kind of was talking to him saying, hey, do you think like I should try this? And he was like, yeah, come out and try it. And so I talked to my parents, and I got to get that opportunity because of that. So all in all, the game of football was about 8 years of my life.
Okay.
But that mindset shift and really being able to shift from like athlete to entrepreneur,
Right.
I think it was tough for me because what sports do, especially professional sports do, is they close your window of time. And what I mean by that is in the NFL, if you're 29, 30, 31 years old, they say that you're like over the hill and like it's time for you to hang it up.
Right.
I turned 30 in April, and I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface on what's possible.
Yeah.
But I would say that shift really occurred, I would say probably 3 months after the draft when I didn't get a rookie contract. It occurred to me, and I was like, okay, I need to figure it out. I think that it was tough, but I will say I think that I was able to understand it and deal with it better than a lot of other people, because I just understood that like father time's undefeated. And so like it's not a matter of if the bus is leaving you, it's like, no, the bus is leaving you. So like now you got to figure out how to get to where you want to go regardless.
Exactly.
That's the biggest thing. And so I think a lot of times what athletes need to understand is like athletes need to stop looking at these exception stories. Like they need to stop looking at like all the respect in the world for Kurt Warner going to the grocery store, playing arena football, and then going to the NFL, right? But like that story is an absolute anomaly, right? Like
right.
Amazing story that Dennis Rodman, amazing story that Dennis Rodman grew 7 inches and was a manager and then played. But like, you can't base your life off of those exception stories because so many things had to happen in that story in order for it to work.
Right.
So my biggest thing was always like, okay, it didn't happen. Now I've got to control what I can control to get to where I want to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's really good. And like during that shift, did you jump straight into entrepreneurship after you got done with football?
Yeah, so in 2018, so draft comes by, I don't get selected.
Right.
And then June, my parents started charging, no, was it June or July? July, my parents started charging me rent. And so I had to figure out like how I was going to make money. Now, I have 2 degrees, and around that time I could have made probably $40,000 to $50,000 with a full-time corporate job.
Right.
And I tell everybody, if you want to work a 9 to 5, like all due respect to you, like those are the people like that you build a company with.
Right.
I just knew that that wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I would start to do things like I had a Christian fitness t-shirt line. I would train kids at the gym I was at. I would flip stuff on OfferUp and eBay. And one day I went to Ross. And so if you play football or you play baseball, you see that all these cleats that are usually $100 online, you go to Ross, they're like $5 to $10. Well, there was 10 pairs there. I bought all 10 pairs. And when I bought all 10 pairs, I flipped them all in like 6 hours on eBay, and I made like $900. So there, it was kind of a spark where it was like, okay, there's no security in this, and there's no necessarily long-term like plan with this. But I think that I kind of want to go this route and really hustle and grind to make money versus like going to a job. Again, there's nothing wrong with a corporate job. Just for me, it was like I like the hustle and grind where it's like basically like some people like to pace when they run. I don't mind sprinting all out and then being exhausted just to do it again and again.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got started. And then so I started doing that, and I was building my social media following because of that. And then at the midpoint of 2018, I realized that like Warren Buffett says a quote that it's like, it's not about how fast you're rowing, it's about the boat that you're in.
The vehicle.
And so when I realized that, my uncle and my grandfather own a manufacturing business in Tucker.
Right.
And so I was kind of showing them what I was doing on social media. And so I said, okay, well, I would love to work with you and do this for the company. And they were like, let's do it. And so that was the end of 2018, and then 2019 happened. Around that time, my dad's friend, who's the sheriff of Henry County, was running, and I went to his kickoff campaign party. And when I went to the kickoff campaign party, I was telling him, because while I was doing this, I've been the chaplain at South Gwinnett for the football team for the last 7 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I started doing that, and the head coach knew the sheriff, and so the sheriff asked me what I was doing. I was telling him everything I was doing about social media and stuff like that, and he was like, well, give your phone number to my wife, because if we need that, we may call you. We probably don't need it, but like we'll call you. And I said, okay. So a month goes by, and he says, well, a month goes by, and he calls me, and he says, hey, come talk to the campaign about like what you think you could do from a value perspective.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. So I go online, and I'm just learning about like what I know and how I know it. And I looked at Barack Obama's campaign. I looked at Donald Trump's campaign. And I was like, okay, social media is super powerful in these elections, but it's underutilized. And so I went and I kind of gave him a plan. And so I started, and so he was like, great, I love it. Let's roll with it. So that was really my first client in 2019.
That's sick.
Around that same time, while I'm doing ministry, I'm working for a nonprofit doing the ministry. Yeah. I have to raise funds for the ministry. So right down the street is Chick-fil-A. And so John Starr, who's my good friend now, he owns that Chick-fil-A. And so I was talking to him one day about ministry, and like that's kind of how we built the relationship. So it was never anything business related, anything like that. Full circle, my uncle had new products that needed lifestyle photos.
Right.
And so a lot of these big firms will overcharge for that stuff. So he was like, hey, can you figure out how to do it at a cost-effective rate? And I was like, okay. So I figured out how to do it. And I had everything down except for the talent itself.
Right.
And so one day I was talking to John and I had talked about our families and stuff. At the time I was dating my now wife. But John had 3 boys at the time. He has a 4th one now. And his whole entire family was like very photogenic. And so I said, bro, this is a crazy idea, but I said, my uncle needs this lifestyle photo shoot. Would you want to be the talent and the models in it? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, okay, great. Yeah. Now I just got to find out where we're going to do it at. And he was like, bro, you can have the photo shoot at my house. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. So
preparing for that for about a week and a half, what I started doing is I started making content that would look good for Chick-fil-A Snellville. That's the name of his franchise.
Right.
And so while we're at the photo shoot, he's just talking to me about like marketing and content and stuff like this. And I didn't know what I know now, but like I said, well, check this out. And I had basically like a little business plan already set up. And so he was like, he was like kind of caught off guard in a good way. And then as I was leaving his house, he said, well, let's set up a meeting to figure out how like you can do this for the franchise. And so long story short, we met for about a month back and forth, and they ended up becoming my first ever corporate client. right? And so we worked together for a while, and in the pandemic, we kind of paused for a little bit. We're still great friends to this day, but that's how that side grew. And then from there, I started during the pandemic. A lot of corporations and politicians wanted digital advertising, so I started doing it for them as well. So I was filming videos, like full blown campaign videos with my iPhone and everything.
Yeah.
And so I started getting nominated for awards by the Gwinnett Chamber. And so when I got nominated for these awards, I went to one of the, right after I got married, the honeymoon was over, I flew back and went to this award show.
Yeah.
And I didn't win the award, but the guy in front of me was a guy by the name of Ali Jamal, who's now my good friend, long-term client. He won the Emerging Entrepreneur Award. And he was super accomplished by then. He had owned like 10 now he owns like 16 to 20 hotels, but he had owned 10 at the time.
Yeah.
So I went online, I saw what he was doing, and thought about ways I could bring value. And so I just DM'd him on Instagram and I said, "Hey, this is what I do. I'd love to see about how I could bring your company value."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So we went and met, and then we started working together. And then another buddy of mine, another client of mine, who's also my good friend, Todd Price, same thing. He owned a roofing company at the time. He owned a supplement company. He was doing a lot of stuff. And so he's a big fitness guy. And his friend named Matthias, I was also friends with.
Right.
And Matthias and I met one day for lunch, and he was like, "You should probably reach out to Todd." So like these guys, and this is one thing I tell anybody who's getting started, these guys get offers all the time for people to work with them.
Exactly.
So you got to make sure that what you're going to do is going to make sense. And so I told him, I said, "Look, I'll do all this stuff for you." And it was an incredibly long list. I said, for free for 6 months. But at the end of it, we really got to talk about a long-term partnership. And he was like, "Bet, let's do it." And then from there, it went well. That turned into working with him on not only the roofing company, but lots of other ventures. And then from there, it's just kind of taken off.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been really, really fun. I am sorry, dude. I'm gonna keep adjusting this thing.
Oh, you're good.
It's been fun. It's been really, really fun. And I think that what I've always told people is like I told you earlier, humility is, and I posted this on social, humility is not about not talking about your accomplishments. It's just realizing that everybody else is capable.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I tell people all the time, like what I do is not that special. I just understood how to work. And that, because in that, me being a millennial, I see this, and I'm not trying to sound like the old guy in the room, but like that's the problem I see with a lot of Gen Z people who are trying to start in entrepreneurship and business.
Right.
Is that they don't want to do the extra things.
Go the extra mile, right?
Because they don't feel like the extra things really matter. Right? So like every time I ever meet with a new prospect or a new opportunity, I spend 15 to 20 minutes on LinkedIn, and I literally take notes about the person. If they have a Facebook, I'll take notes about the person. And what I'm doing there is I'm looking for one chemistry point so that when the conversation starts, I don't come across as a salesman. I come across as somebody that you know.
Exactly.
Right? If I have a big video gig where like I have a bunch of my team members working, like I always make sure that like I go get a haircut. Like I always make sure that like I wear the nicest clothes possible. If it's a really big gig that has a lot of profit, like I'll go buy new sneakers to make sure that my sneakers look brand new. It's like the little stuff. A lot of people think
you care.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. A lot of people. The problem right now, and it's even in my generation, but the problem right now with entrepreneurship is people believe that their skills are what's going to separate them. And I think that skills in essence are commodity. So you have to be able to bring skills and your brand and your professionalism to the table in order for it to all make sense. Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah. So, I mean, people who will tell you like, "Oh, this doesn't matter. Oh, that doesn't matter. My image doesn't matter." It's like, that's fine. But the reason you're saying that is because you want to live in your own silo. And usually people who live in their own silos like that don't get to where they want to be.
Exactly.
So it's like, if you're somebody, I always do the country club example, right? Like the country club, when you go to it, it has strict rules about dress code, right? If you want to be the person who walks in and doesn't want to wear what the dress code says, that's fine. But what you're basically telling me is that the opportunities in the country club aren't valuable enough for you to put on a collared shirt.
It's a little more effort. Right. Yeah, exactly.
And the thing is, it's never anything like crazy that people are asking. Like people just ask people to,
right.
yeah, they ask them to look professional. They ask them to show up on time. They ask them to do these things, and people don't want to go the extra mile. So it's that, and then it's also, I think, like, people don't want to invest in themselves, right? So, like, there have been plenty of times where, like, I'll start working with a videographer at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the same year, they have the same equipment, they use the same software, they do the same, and it's like, no, in order for you to, like, take what you're doing to the next level, you have to continue to invest in yourself and deliver a better quality product. Because I tell everybody, I call it the $10,000 mindset method. Think of anything you do, whether it's photography, whether it's building sales funnels, whether it's graphic design, whether it's sending invoices. If somebody paid you $10,000 for every action that you did, what would you do different? So people say, well, I'd get there early, I'd be more professional, I'd make sure everything is pinpoint perfect. And it's like, all that stuff you can do right now.
Exactly.
You're just choosing not to.
Exactly.
And if you want to get to the point to where you get overpaid for what you do, it's important that you are able to do the little things now. So that's what I tell everybody. Is like, I can tell when somebody says they want to be successful, and I'm not saying I'm just uber successful, but I feel like I'm a lot further than a lot of people my age.
Right.
And so when somebody says, hey, I want to be successful, I want to do this, but then I see the actions, like, you can tell, and people ahead of you can tell too. So it's like, it's one of these things where it's like, okay, keep doing that, keep doing what you want to do, but all you're doing is hindering yourself in the process. Yeah.
That's real. No, it's good. You're dropping bars right now.
Hey, I'm trying. I'm trying.
You're dropping bars right now. So, like, okay, so through this journey of where you're at today, right?
Right.
There's ups and downs. There's low points, right?
Yeah.
How did you keep the faith throughout this whole journey and, like, getting to where you're at today?
You know, everybody talks about highs and lows, but what I've learned, and I've learned this from guys who are well ahead of me in business, what I've learned is that the difference between people who are really successful and everybody else is how they view the highs and lows. So if we're looking at a graph, I think average people who think that this is a high, successful people view it as this high. And people who think that this is a low, they view it as this low. So it's like, at the end of the day, it's like, for me, there's been times where, like, the business has gotten stressful because, like, as you grow, things cost more money and stuff like that. Right. But I was in a mastermind. It's called the Arte Syndicate with Andy Frisella. And he said something one time that was extremely powerful. He said, excellence is exhausting. And when you get tired and you don't know what to do and you want to quit, just ask yourself what you expect when you got here. And so I learned that. He said that in a mastermind probably 2 years ago. And so, like, dealing with the lows for me, I just understand that there's very few things that happen in the low, especially in my business, that's going to cause my business to absolutely crumble.
Right.
There's very few things that could cause my business to absolutely flourish, right? And so I think that because I have that basically, like, methodical, almost agnostic approach to highs and lows, it allows me to just continue to do what I'm doing, because I realize that there's very, very few things that can happen that can cause a business to just absolutely crumble or cause a business to absolutely flourish. So that's really how I deal with it. I just understand that, like, no problem is as big as, like, anybody really makes it seem.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, because I mean, what happens is people oftentimes will tell you, like, oh no, what about this? What about that? Or, like, what if we don't do it this way? What if we do it that way? I say, okay, I always do this. I have a mindset. It's called, like, the effort index. And so I say two things to myself. What's the worst that can happen? And what's the likelihood that it'll occur? Right? Because Murphy's Law tells us that if something bad is going to happen, it will. But if there's a 1% chance that it's actually going to occur, there's not a reason to put any effort into it.
Right.
If there's a little problem, but there's a high chance, then you got to put a little bit more effort. Only when there's something that's super catastrophic and the likelihood is super high do you put in a lot of effort. But there's so few situations when it comes to business that actually occur like that you didn't see beforehand. Like, nobody wakes up to their business and says, and their business was fine on Tuesday, and on Wednesday they're like, I'm going to lose everything. No, what happened was you didn't see the tower falling, and you decided to, or you saw the tower falling, and you decide to do nothing about it.
Yeah.
For me, it's all about like putting the effort to the things that need effort, but then understanding that like nothing's gonna crush the business instantly, and nothing's gonna make it explode instantly.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good. So I have a couple quotes that you tweeted recently.
Okay.
I want to dive into.
Yeah, for sure.
And it ties in perfect with where we're at, just about like success in business.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So you tweeted this the other day. It says, "Success is built in the process, not just the goal. Prepare your business for where you see it going, and trust the journey." And so, like, what do you think is like the best way for people to prepare? Because maybe not so much your audience, but I know my audience is like coming out of college,
right,
and they're trying to create
right.
business and wanting to get into entrepreneurship. Like,
right.
What's the best way to actually prepare for that journey?
I would think the best way to prepare for the journey is just to first off, you got to understand that entrepreneurship is something that nobody's going to understand around you. So like, I love my mom and dad to death. I have an amazing relationship to them. But whenever in 2018 I started doing a lot of these entrepreneurship stuff, they were kind of like pushing back, and they were like, no, you have 2 degrees, like you need to get a corporate job like over and over and over again. And if you don't have the mental wherewithal to understand that like you're the only one who has the vision, so you have to understand it twofold. You have to understand that you're the only one that has the vision, so you're going to sound crazy to everybody.
Right.
Okay. And then once you sound crazy to everybody, everybody's going to push back. So you have to be really, really good at being able to understand your vision and understand that you're automatically going to get backlash from it, right? I had a quote right here. I took it down. I'm getting it redone, but it's by Robert Kennedy, and it says, "Some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not." And so, like, when you understand that, that's how you can prepare yourself mentally for entrepreneurship. The next thing I would tell you is to have the mindset and understanding that it's an activities game. So like my friend and client Ali Jamal always says, he says, don't ever manage your outcomes, manage your activities, right? So if you say, when you look at entrepreneurship, if you break it down into the activities every day, you'll understand that like you'll be able to get to where you want to go, but you'll prepare yourself for what you want to do. Like it's like, okay, I want to start a t-shirt business, and this year I want to make $80,000. Okay, for you to make $80,000, let's just say you have to DM, once you break down the numbers, you have to DM 300 people a day.
Right.
Okay, if you prepare yourself to do that, one or two things is going to happen, right? You're either one, going to actually achieve that, or two, you're not going to achieve that, and you're going to have to hold yourself accountable. I think that you can prepare yourself coming out of college or whatever phase you're in for entrepreneurship by just understanding that like everybody's gonna think you're crazy. You have to keep going, and then you're gonna have to understand that you're gonna have to work twice as hard as everybody. That quote, so over the last year, I've really been in a phase where like my business has been growing really, really fast. But the issue is I have about 18 months ago, I started noticing that I was really the bottleneck of the business. And so I think that a lot of people, what they do sometimes is they say, without me, the business can't move on. Or like they'll work with a client, they'll say that client will fail without me. And a lot of people look at that as a badge of honor, but I look at it as a lack of character. Because if you're actually working to try to further your legacy, honor your purpose, and honor God's purpose in your life,
right,
you need to set it up to where that if you leave, it's better off than when you flourish. It can still flourish. And so a lot of those tweets have been me just talking about building processes and building teams. And that's really what I've been focused on the last 18 months. So I've hired a lot more creators, like content creators, videographers, photographers to work with. And then I've hired a large virtual staff, so full-time VAs. And so the reason that I've been adamant about tweeting about processes is because that's the phase of life I'm in, right? It's like I can't be the bottleneck anymore if I want to grow. So I got to continue to build processes. That way, if I need to step out and let somebody else run it, it's already in place. So so that's really what that's been focused on, is like me trying to just say, okay, I have these processes. Let me try to make sure I take them to the next level. That way, as I bring more people in, I can take myself out of the equation and then focus on the things that are my strength in the business.
That's really good.
Yeah.
It's really